Have you ever wondered how long that it actually takes to buy a house during PCS? Well, maybe you just got orders to Eglin Air Force Base, Hurlburt Field, or Duke Field, maybe even somewhere along the Florida Panhandle. And suddenly it feels like you have 100 different decisions to make all at once. Should you buy? Should you rent? How soon should you start talking to a realtor? When do you talk to a lender? Do you wait until you get here to look at homes, or should you, start looking before you even arrive? These are questions I hear every single week. The good news is once you understand the process, it becomes much less intimidating. Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivera with the Property Group 850, and today I'm going to walk you through the entire home buying timeline from the day that you receive your orders all the way until closing date. I'll also share some of the biggest mistakes that I see military families make along the way and hopefully help you avoid some unnecessary stress. So let's jump in. Step 1, the orders arrive. Let's imagine you just opened your email. Your orders are official. The excitement steps in, and then reality starts hitting. Within the next hour, you are probably texting your family, looking at schools, researching neighborhoods, maybe even opening up Zillow to see what's available. Guys, that's completely normal. In fact, almost every military family that I work with tells me they did the exact same thing. But here is something, that's always encouraging that buyers need to do before they even start looking at homes is pause. Not because of you shouldn't be excited, but because of buying a home is about so much more than the pictures that you see online. Instead, spend those first couple of days asking yourself a few questions. What does your family actually need? How many bedrooms make sense? Do you have pets? Do you want a neighborhood with sidewalks? Would you rather have more land? Or is being close to restaurants and things in the city better? Do you have children? Will schools play a role in all of those decisions? Those conversations matter more than whether a kitchen has white cabinets or granite countertops. One thing that I've learned over the years is that buyers rarely regret taking a little extra time to make those thoughtful decisions. They usually regret rushing. Don't start with Zillow. This one surprises people. I actually don't think that Zillow should be your first stop. Hear me out. Websites, they are fantastic. They're really a great tool, but they don't tell you that it's how it's actually like living somewhere. They don't tell you whether a neighborhood has lots of military families, and they don't tell you how active that the community is. They don't tell you whether kids are outside riding their bikes every single evening, and they don't tell you what businesses are opening nearby. They definitely don't tell you how the area feels. And honestly, that's the part that people remember after they move. The house eventually becomes a home, but it's the community that is around it that shapes your everyday life. And that's why you spend so much time talking to buyers about the lifestyle before I even start scheduling showings. Step 2, should you buy or should you rent? This is probably one of the first conversations that you'll have. And honestly, there isn't one answer that fits everyone. Some military families know that they'll only be stationed here for a short amount of time. Others think Northwest Florida might become their forever home. And some are excited to build some equity, while others, they might want a little bit of flexibility that renting provides. Both are okay. The important thing is making a decision that, is based on your goals, not what someone else tells you is the right thing to do. I tell people all the time that buying a home it's a personal decision, not a competition. If buying makes financial, sense and it fits into your family's plan, wonderful. If renting is better and it's that, option that's good for right now, that's okay too. There isn't a prize for buying sooner or buying later. Step 3, build your team. Now, let's say that you've decided that buying is the direction that you want to go. The next step isn't looking at houses, it's building your team. And your 2 biggest players are your realtor and your lender. Now, these 2 professionals are going to guide you on almost every decision moving forward. Your lender is going to help you understand your finances, and your realtor is going to help you understand the market. Together, they're going to help you make decisions with confidence instead of guessing. One thing that I always tell military buyers is you do not have to have everything figured out before reaching out. Some of my favorite conversations happen months before someone ever even buys. There isn't any pressure. We are simply creating I would say more of like a game plan. Maybe they need to improve their credit, or maybe that they're trying to decide between 2 different cities, because maybe they're comparing neighborhoods, or maybe they don't even know what questions that they need to ask just yet. And that's okay, because of planning early is never wasted time. Step 4, talking to your lender. Let's talk about lenders for a minute. I think that one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is that talking to a lender somehow commits them to buying a house. They kind of think that they have to do it immediately, and it doesn't happen that way all the time. A lender is just simply helping you understand where that you stand today. Sometimes buyers are pleasantly surprised, because they find out that they're already in a great position to purchase. Other times, the lender might say, if you pay off this credit card over the next few months, your buying power could improve. They could possibly say, if you wait until an account closes, that you could qualify for maybe a better rate. Those are incredibly valuable, because of wouldn't you rather know that before that you found that perfect house instead of after? Credit preparation is actually one of the longest parts of the process for some buyers. It's, I would say, very common for someone to spend several months improving their financial picture before they ever begin seriously looking at homes, and that's perfectly okay, because of everyone's timeline is different. Step 5, understanding your budget. Now, this is another area where I think that buyers get confused. Your lender will tell you what you're approved for. That necessarily doesn't mean that what you should kind of spend. Those are 2 different numbers. Just because of the bank approves you for a certain amount doesn't automatically mean that's where you'll be most comfortable. Think about your life. Do you like to travel often? Do your kids play sports, or are you planning to renovate? Kind of think, do you enjoy going out to dinner all the time, or would you rather have a lower payment and a little extra flexibility each month? Those are conversations worth having before you decide on a price range. I have found that the happiest homeowners are usually the ones who bought comfortably, not necessarily the most house that they could afford. So now let's talk about step 6, the home search. Now we finally get to the exciting part, looking at the homes. Now, this is where everybody's journey becomes unique. I've had buyers walk into the very first house and know immediately. And then I've also worked with families who looked for homes for several months before finding the right fit. Neither experience is wrong. Buying a home isn't about being the fastest. It's about making a decision that you'll still feel good about in years. One thing that I encourage buyers to remember is this: don't shop with emotion first. Shop with purpose. It's easy to fall in love with beautiful kitchen and upgraded bathrooms or even stunning backyards. Guys, those things are wonderful, but I always bring buyers back to one question. Does this home support the lifestyle that you want? Because of eventually the excitement of moving day fades. What you're left with is your everyday routine. And to me, that's what matters most. Making an offer so you found the right house. You've looked at dozens of listings, maybe toured homes in person, or maybe you've been walking through homes over FaceTime because of you're still across the country. And either way, you finally found the one that checks all of those boxes. All of the boxes to me that matter the most. And now what? Now, this is where a lot of buyers start getting nervous because of now there's paperwork and negotiations, deadlines, the unknown. The first thing that we're going to do is sit down and discuss an offer strategy. And no, there isn't one strategy that works for every home. Every market is different. Every seller is different. Some homes have multiple offers within hours. Others, to me have been sitting for weeks. So sometimes there may be a little bit more room to negotiate on that price. Sometimes the purchase price stays exactly where it is, but we're able to negotiate the closing cost or some repairs instead. This is where having someone who understands the local market becomes really important because of every situation is unique. Your offer gets accepted. Congratulations. This is one of the most exciting phone calls, that you'll get during the entire process. But here's something that I always tell buyers. Getting under contract isn't the finish line. It's really kind of like the beginning of the next chapter. Because of now we start checking boxes, the inspections, the insurance, the appraisal, the loan processing, final approvals. There are a lot of moving pieces happening behind the scenes. To me, the good news, you don't have to keep track of all of them by yourself. That's exactly why you have a team. The inspection. Now, let's talk about the inspections. Because this is probably where buyers experience the biggest emotional roller coaster. Here's what happens almost every single time. The inspection report comes back and suddenly, buyers think that they bought the worst house in America. I promise you didn't. Every inspection looks long. Every inspection has pages of notes. It's literally the inspector's job. They're trained to point out everything that they see. They're trained to point out loose outlet covers, missing caulks, small cracks, a GFCI outlet, roof flashing, HVAC maintenance recommendations, even brand new construction has inspection reports. So don't panic when you see a long document. Instead of focus on understanding what actually matters. What's routine maintenance? What's cosmetic? What's something that you should budget for down the road? And what actually and truly deserves another conversation with the seller. That's where your realtor helps guide you through the process. Not every item needs to become a negotiation. Sometimes the report simply gives you a better understanding of the home that you will soon own. Now, the appraisal. Once inspections are finished, the next big milestone is the appraisal. Now, this part is often misunderstood. The appraisal isn't deciding whether the house is beautiful. They're determining whether the home's value supports the purchase. Think of it this way. The lender wants to make sure that the home is worth what they're lending money on. Most of the time, this process is pretty straightforward, but occasionally an appraisal comes in lower than expected. If that happens, don't panic. There are several different paths forward, and your realtor will walk you through your options. Whether that's renegotiating, reviewing the appraisal, or, exploring other solutions. Again, you don't have to solve these problems alone. Now, underwriting. This is probably, I would say, the least exciting part of buying a home because look, honestly, a lot of it feels like the waiting game. Your lender is verifying your employment, reviewing documents, and making sure that every number matches. They want to make sure that, you are confirming any of your income and reviewing any of your assets. They're just trying to cross every T and dot every I. Sometimes buyers receive a request for additional documents, and that's completely normal. Maybe they need another bank statement or an updated pay stub. Sometimes they even ask for a letter, explaining a deposit. Don't take it personally. They're simply making sure that everything is accurate before closing. The biggest piece of advice that I can give here is respond quickly. The faster that the paperwork comes back, the smoother underwriting tends to go. So, whether you're waiting, one mistake I see buyers make during this underwriting time is making big financial decisions. Please don't finance furniture. Don't buy a new vehicle and don't open a new credit cards. I also suggest don't make any big purchases without talking to your lender. I know that it's exciting and that you're picturing your new living room, but whenever you're thinking about buying that new dining table, maybe even new appliances, but guys, just wait until you've officially closed because it can save you a lot of unnecessary headaches. Preparing, for closing day. So look, as closing day gets closer, things start happening kind of quickly. Your lender will finalize your loan. You'll receive closing documents and you'll confirm utilities, coordinate movers, schedule your final walkthrough. There is a lot happening. But at this point, most of the heavy lifting is already behind you. One thing that I always remind military families is give yourself grace. PCS moves are stressful enough. Buying a home at the same time can kind of feel a little overwhelming. But look, it's okay. If things don't go perfectly, that's normal. So whenever you do that final walkthrough before closing, you'll complete what's, kind of going through your mind and everything. This is kind of, I would say, not another inspection, but you're simply just kind of confirming, that everything's in that agreed upon condition. Did you negotiate any repairs? Are those all completed? Is the seller leaving anything behind that's not supposed to be there? You want to make sure that everything is completely how you agreed. to it, because of most walkthroughs, they're really quick, but look, before you sign that paperwork, you want to make sure that the home is the way that you want it. Closing day. Whenever you're talking about the closing day that you've been waiting for, you're going to sit down, you're going to sign what feels like a mountain of paperwork. And I always joke that your signature, it doesn't quite look like what it does from the beginning to the end. But look, once those documents are signed and everything has officially funding, guys, you receive the keys, and just like that, you're a new homeowner. It's, I would say, one of my favorite moments, not because of the transaction, but because of what it represents for military families, especially. It's stability after weeks or months of planning, packing, coordinating, and moving. You finally have a place to call home. Now, look, let's talk about what happens after closing. Here is something that people don't always realize. Closing isn't the end of our relationship, or at least it shouldn't be. Some of my favorite moments happen long after closings happen. I'll get pictures of the painted nurseries or the Christmas trees in the living room where it says, I found the perfect spot for the tree, or kids on their first day of school. I love seeing families celebrating birthdays in their homes, especially the ones that they weren't sure if they were going to buy in the first place. That's the part of this job that truly means the most to me, because buying a house is really about what happens after you move in. It's about building a life, meeting your neighbors, finding your coffee shop, or texting me about your, 5th year in your nice new house that you love. It's watching your kids make friends or feeling like you belong, especially for military families who've had to start over several times. That, to me, is what is incredibly meaningful. So if you've made it this far, I hope one thing stands out. Buying a home during a PCS doesn't have to be overwhelming. Yes, there are a lot of steps. Yes, there are a lot of deadlines. And yes, there's paperwork. But when you break the process down one step at a time, it's much more manageable than it kind of seems. Every family's timeline is different. Some buyers spend months preparing financially before they ever begin looking. Others receive short notice and move much faster. Neither timeline is wrong. The important thing is starting with a plan. Surround yourself with people that you trust and ask questions. Don't be afraid to slow down when you need to. And remember, you're not just buying a house. You're choosing where birthdays will be celebrated, where holidays will be spent, and where your kids might ride bikes after dinner, where your family will build routines and memories that last long past this PCS assignment is completely over. If you're planning a move to Northwest Florida, I hope this gave you a clearer picture of what to expect from start to finish. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. I truly wish you and your family the very best on your next chapter. And I hope to see you in the next video.